In the pre-hospital environment, most of what we do is poo-poo pains and lift assists. But occasionally, we get a real patient that is particularly heinous. And that's when you call this specialized team of paramedics. They're known as the Salty Squad, and these are their stories.
What do you got, Eric?
60-year-old chest pain. I'm not quite sure. He's not cooperative.
How long's that been going on?
I've been here 2-3 minutes.
No. How long's this chest pain been going on?
I don't know. He won't answer my questions.
Did you get any vitals yet?
No, not cooperative for vital signs.
I think we probably ought to get the life back.
It's not a bad idea. Hey, grab me a donut while you're over there.
That's a good idea. Maybe run a 12 lead on him?
Not a bad idea.
That didn't go quite as well as planned, Eric.
You're absolutely right. What are we doing here?
We're talking about history taking.
We are.
Yep.
Now, why did we go out there to Law and Order?
Yeah, it's pretty important to, a good history, a good assessment is extremely important. However, sometimes when your patient's really sick and about to die, you probably need to start doing action. Like our PAPA narrative acronym, you need to go right to the A sometimes. Start doing something.
Yeah, a lot of what we're going to talk about here today, you may not do in a patient.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, you might, depending on their condition. But for the majority, I would say, of our patients that are awake, alert, and talking, getting a good history is very important.
And bottom line here, we're going to go over the objectives in a moment, but the bottom line is we want to get a good history. We're sort of missing those life-threatening emergencies that can really be life-threatening.
Yeah, for our patients, for sure. My name is Matt Ball. I'm a firefighter, paramedic, registered nurse here in the Dallas area.
My name's Eric Axene. I'm an ER physician. And we're going to get started on the objectives. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to list the components of a good history.
Yep, and then we're going to describe how the components of a thorough history can improve patient care.
And then we'll end by identifying how red flags obtained in a history can help identify potential life-threatening situations. When I'm teaching medical students how to take a good history, I don't think it's much different than what you learned in medic school or in nursing school too. But one of the things that I would do is I would help my students who'd really never done this before is to just give them a framework of it's called scaffolding, where you just kind of build a framework of what to put kind of fill in the blanks with. Initially when you take a history, you may not have a lot of knowledge to fill in with experiences and book knowledge.
Exactly.
But as you get more experience and you get more studied, you can start fitting more things into the scaffold, right? So here's a scaffolding, if you will, of what we're going to be talking about, the components of a history. So scene safety.
Yep, very important.
Number one. And then that initial impression.
Again, extremely important.
Yep.
That's where you're going to decide, like when we were on the bike path, are we staying and playing or are we loading and going?
Yep.
That's kind of where that comes in.
Yeah, and if you're loading and going, you may not be getting that full history.
Correct.
But now you can get a lot of information too in your history, not from the patient. Maybe it's an unresponsive patient, but their family, or bystanders.
Yep,
there.
nursing home staff, medical staff, at a doctor's office or something, in a restaurant, anything like that.
Which was really the inspiration behind doing what we did for the beginning, for our intro, is we're like a detective.
Yes.
We're on
gathering
scene.
clues.
Gathering
Yep.
clues, that's
Yep.
right. So,
and they come from a lot of different places. Like you say, what the patient looks like, what the patient or the bystander tells you, what does the scene look like?
Yeah, the next one, on-scene information.
Yep.
You can you see a bunch of pill bottles,
Yep.
or there's who knows what, a candlestick in the library.
Right.
You get
Empty beer bottles all over the place.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the classic SAMPLE acronym, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Sample history.
OPQRST.
Yeah.
Yep.
And OPQRST is, we'll break it down, but the OPQRST we like to think of as part of the S in sample. So it's really sample, and then to break down the S to get all the components of a history, we put in the OPQRST. That's the way we like to look at it.
Yep.
So let's break down the first component, scene safety. So what are the priorities of scene safety, and what are the safety concerns?
So safety priorities, obviously, our safety is paramount, right? Because if we get hurt, the old adage, if we get hurt, we can't help anybody, right? So our safety, first responder safety, the safety of our crew, all that stuff. That is the most important thing. It's kind of like if you've ever talked to a lifeguard. If they go out and the person that's drowning, obviously they're probably panicking. They might even get aggressive with the lifeguard.
Yep.
And sometimes they might have to push off or hit them to make them knock it off. Because if they drown the lifeguard, they're both dying.
They're both dead.
Right? So, and then finally, obviously after that is care for the patient.
And some of the other things I just like to mention when you're on scene and you're trying to assess the scene for safety, there's you're coming up on hazardous material, or there's certain types of scenes, as in your training, where you've got protocols to follow. And certain sorts of situations that I'm just throwing in hazardous materials. We just did our hazmat lecture for EMS ops. There's a whole protocol of chain of command with all the hazwoppers and all that stuff you taught us about. So.
Yeah, and even like you pull up on scene, we had a call one time. We pulled up, and it was a very large. There was a lot going on, and I have to sneeze here. Say purple. There went away. Yes.
It worked.
It worked perfectly.
You got to check out our
Almost had
podcast
that.
when we break down the
That's
physiology
That's right.
of
The
sneeze.
But anyway, we showed up to this area in town. There was literally hundreds of kids, and you could tell that there was a lot of tension in the air. And so we kind of had to be a little bit cautious about how we proceeded because, again, if we got hurt, then the people that were hurt there wouldn't have gotten help.
Not going to be much good to them if you're shot or whatever.
Correct.
Which brings me to some areas of scenes, safety concerns. Areas of high crime rates. And you're going to approach a scene a little bit differently, in a high crime area downtown versus in a rural area.
Yep.
Well, that could be dangerous too.
Yeah. You never want to. It's like talking about reading notes. You never put the blinders on. You never put your guard down, regardless of the look of the house. Anybody could be dangerous to you, so be paying attention.
When you're on scene of a gunshot wound or stabbing, foul play, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, and luckily, like I'm in my department. Any call like that, we're getting PD showing up first,
Of course.
because obviously they have the tools and the equipment to handle a threat like that. And so we let them go in, make sure that there's not an issue there, and then we can go in and take care of the patients.
We talked about hazardous materials, but extreme environments too, like in our hypothermia lecture. You want to put yourself in an environment where you're exposed and then you're in danger. Like you said, you're not going to be much help to anybody if you're putting yourself into harm's way.
Right.
So high suspicion for danger is crucial. So we must be safe first to ensure patient safety. That's a good thing to remember.
And I would say, we practice what happens if the worst happens and you walk into a house and some guy comes around a door and sticks a knife up to your throat or something like that. We talk about that all the time, hitting your emergency button on the radio. Have a certain code that you might call out to dispatch that lets them know, like, hey, I need help. So make sure you know the procedures for that so that if that does happen, you know what to do in that situation.
And be vigilant. Just because a scene is initially safe doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
All right, so we've got a safe scene now, right? So now we're assessing our patient. That initial assessment, really important.
Yes.
Obviously, the ABCs, airway, breathing, and circulation, those are the first steps to patient assessment, unless, of course, there are other life-threatening conditions that exist, like a major hemorrhage. Throw that tourniquet on.
Yeah.
But ABCs, the initial assessment, the initial impression, too, there's something that has to be done when you're walking up, and I think a lot of the experienced paramedics watching, you kind of know that just getting on scene at a trauma, for example.
Yeah, if you see that obvious bleeding, look for it, expose it, address it. But like ABCs, like 95% of our patients, I can walk up and without saying a word within 5 seconds, I can tell if somebody's got a patent airway and if they're breathing and if they're circulating because they're making eye contact with me. I say hello, they respond back.
Yep.
Their skin looks fine, like that person's obviously got an open airway, they're breathing and they're circulating. So you can make that assessment pretty quick.
And the last part of an initial impression, too, I think it's important to identify injury patterns. We talked about a trauma, for example, right? You know, when you're looking at a trauma, you know you're going to likely need a trauma center. You know where you're going to be going. You're going to look for certain things like seatbelt signs and hemorrhages and bruising patterns, because you're in that frame of mind with your initial impression of this being a trauma patient.
Right. Exactly.
You don't want to put the blinders on,
Nope.
but you want to get yourself in that trauma frame of mind. Also, not only that, but it also kind of puts you in the right protocol, right? You're
Yes.
working through the protocols. So the initial impression gives us a summary of how the patients appeared on arrival, and that's something that we document. It gives us something to compare to.
Yeah.
Did your interventions help? Well, the initial impression, maybe the patient's getting worse or better, is going to direct your care.
Yeah, their GCS was 3, now it's 15. That's good.
Yeah.
If it goes the other way, that's not so good.
Not so good. So we talked about the scene safety, initial impression. Where are we going to head next?
I think we're going to secondary impression. What are we going to?
Yeah, where are we going next? Oh, let's review a little bit of a GCS.
That's a good idea.